today's panel is about future of supply chain and leading us through the second lockdown. We have invited two speakers, one representative, Matthias from Kühne und Nagel, and Nina from Forto. So they will present themselves later on. And we have three parts. First, we have the introduction round, then a discussion, and in the end, you will have the possibility to ask some questions. And if you have questions during the session, during the discussion, please put them in the chat, and we will then ask them at the end. And this is from us. I think, Max, I will hand over to you because Max is going to be our moderator, and he can maybe do a quick introduction what we are going to talk about today, and what is your background?
Sure, thanks, Jonas. So I'm really excited to be able to moderate this discussion today. I think we have lots of super exciting and super current topics we're going to look at. A little bit to myself, I'm a PhD student at the University of St. Gallen. I'm more specifically at the Institute of Supply Chain Management. So in our institute, we research all kinds of topics that have to do with disruptions of supply chains, sustainable supply chains, also new ways to be able to coordinate logistics, to be able to get the maximum out of a coordinated concept, you would say. So I have a background in mechanical engineering and robotics, and then I switched over to the evil side or the bright side, depends on which direction you want to look at it from. And I still work in a technological context. So we at the Institute, we're working very closely with industry partners and supply chain managers and procurement managers to implement technological concepts to be able to establish resilient supply chains, to be able to establish sustainable supply chains. So I'm really, really excited for this discussion today. Just a little transition, we are going to talk about three main topics today. So first of all, we will sort of tear apart this conundrum that we've had in the past few months, or I would say since the beginning of the year. What even happened with supply chains during COVID-19, and what is the aftermath? And now, is there going to be a second wave? And if yes, are supply chains ready for this next shock? Then later on, we're going to talk about a very important topic that moves the supply chain world, which is sustainability. Talk about technologies and innovation and the status quo of sustainability within supply chains nowadays. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about you, the potential supply chain manager of the future. So I'm really excited to hand over to Nina Göntgen-Voss from Forto to introduce herself and give a short presentation of the company.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thank you to the inno-maker team for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here and really looking forward to discussion. So before we dive in, let me quickly give you an introduction of the company, what we're doing, and also a little bit of background of myself. So Jonas, if we go to the first slide. Yeah, so Forto was actually named Freight Hub for the very majority of its existence. It was founded in March 2016. I joined in May 2016, back then as an intern. And I would say I grew up with the company. So I started as an intern in a sales and business development team, then moved on to operations, took on project management in various areas. And right now I'm leading the fantastic team of global supply chain operations, consisting of 4 different teams: rate management, tender management, financial operations, and also controlling. And on top of that, I'm currently leading our sustainability efforts together with a colleague. So as I said, Freight Hub was founded in 2016 with the head office in Berlin. After that, we soon found ourselves expanding throughout Germany with offices in Hamburg, Bremen, and Köln. Then last year, we expanded even further to Asia. We right now have 4 different offices or 3 different offices in China, 1 in Hong Kong and 1 in Singapore. And we by now employ more than 400 employees in those 10 offices worldwide. So we are a digital freight forwarder. We're trying to bring digitalization into the freight industry, into logistics industry. And I would say throughout the last 4.5 years, we have managed to at least ignite quite a lot of change in the industry. And we ourselves have now made the transition from a pure freight forwarder or transport company to a digital supply chain solutions provider. So we're also offering now, on top of the transportation that we're organizing, also digital products to our customers, software products in the end. And with that, we also rebranded from FreightHub to Forto. And with this concept, we by now have achieved to win more than 2,500 customers from various industries, a strong focus on retail customers, but also almost everything else you can imagine. Probably quite a lot of brands you would also recognize, like Home24, for example, or On Shoes, and so on. And I already said it earlier, I could probably talk for hours about Forto and its history and what we do, but instead of that, I will just show you a quick video so that you get a great overview of what we do. Do we also have the sound? Otherwise, I'm just going to talk you through. It's also fine. Yeah, so basically what we do is we make shipping products as easy as sending an email. So you can just go to our platform, type in the details that you have for your, if you continue playing, Jonas, and I can just talk it through. Ah, perfect. Then you tell us from where to where you want to ship your goods, how much, which additional services you need. And then you get, just like you would get for a flight search, all kinds of different options with very transparent information about it. So on the price, on the transport plan, everything's there. And then you can choose the option that's best for you, either in terms of price or in terms of transit time, and then just book it within an instant of a click. You also have a shipment overview where you get all of your shipments filtered by whatever action you need. And from there on can easily take steps and take actions that are required. Yeah, you can also track and trace where your goods are at the moment in real time and see when it arrives in your warehouse. It's super easy to collaborate also with stakeholders through our activity feed. So you can invite as many participants as you like from all kinds of different areas and departments throughout the organization, and they can just communicate between them or also with our logistics managers through this activity feed. Moreover, it's possible to manage all kinds of documents for customs clearance, for example, online. You can just upload everything here. And then our logistics managers take care of it. And I've been talking about digital products that we're right now adding. Forto-X is one of them. It's one of the most advanced purchase order management systems in the market. So you can just upload your purchase orders either via a spreadsheet or through an API, and then basically plan when all of these different products and purchase orders need to be shipped. So this brings in quite a lot of automation potential and also more forward-looking planning, which I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, is crucial in these times and will become more and more important. So next slide. What's left to say is, why do we do all this? And we've defined it very clearly that we are in business to build a more responsible society. What does that mean for us? And if we go to the next slide, we've broken it down to 2 core parts of it. So the one hand side is prosperity. And I think if we look at what global trade has done throughout the last centuries, lifting people out of poverty, enabling them to build a life on their own, to build their own businesses, combined with technology, which was one of the key enablers for our life today, this is really a great cause to be part of. And I think the whole shipping industry is really engaging here. On the other hand side, we have sustainability. And this is what I'm currently also focusing on quite a lot, because climate change is a global problem. It's also a problem that we need to face together as a society. That's why we as a company also want to engage in finding ways in order to help our planet, in order to reduce carbon emissions, or also, or rather greenhouse gas emissions, and to also enable our customers to make more conscious and more sustainable solutions. And I'm gonna end here right now, because I think we're gonna talk about the whole thing a bit more later on. And Matthias also needs some time to present himself, and Kühn + Nagel. But what I want to end with is let's act today for tomorrow, because together we can make a change.
Great, thank you very much, Nina. So with this, I will hand over to Dr. Matthias Hodel, who's Global Head of Commercial Integrated Logistics Solutions at Kühn + Nagel.
Thank you very much, Maximilian. And thanks actually to the inno-maker team for giving me the opportunity to be part of that panel. Really looking forward to the remaining 45 minutes. Already the prep conversation you had was really interesting. Nina, you said company founded in 2016. The company that I represent was founded 126 years earlier, which is 1890. So we're looking at a rather young company versus a company that you might think of as a dinosaur. I think it comes clear that when we look at the way how we position Kühn + Nagel in the market, and the way how we approach certain topics, especially the ones that we're going to deal with in today's conversation, are actually quite similar between the two companies, right? So that's an interesting observation and probably an important comment to make up front. I'm going to make two statements about myself at the end of the intro. First, I want to speak a bit about the Kühn + Nagel group. Jonas, when you introduced inno-maker, you said that you put the student in the center of your attention, right? As a commercial company, we need to do the same, not with the student, but with the customer, right? So at the end, at the center of everything that we as a company are doing, we have the customer. And when we think of our customers, then it's driven by a realization that customers expect today everything to be available anytime, anywhere, right? And this creates a multitude of challenges, not directly for ourselves, but for our customers, right? So because we're, as a logistics company, enabling other companies to serve the consumer. And which is then fueled by instant information, the fast pace of innovation and evolving technologies and advancing economies. What does that mean for our customers, right? These challenges must be converted. They must be converted with regards to immediate response time, customization of products, need to reduce complexity and measurability. And ultimately, they need to turn that into fruitful business opportunities. This can mean anything from accessing new markets, from continuously improving customer experience, innovation, enhancing operational performance, and so on and so forth, right? And ultimately, it's about keeping the promise that they have given to their consumers. And what can we do? What is the role of a logistics company, right? We have our mission defined as follows. We improve our customers' performance by driving value chains through people, expertise, and technology, right? And I believe that's a statement that Nina could probably sign also, right? So in that context, the two companies are pretty much alike. When we look at size and scale, it's quite different. We're looking at a company that has 83,000 logistics experts globally, covering 4 key areas of activities. Sea logistics, where we are the largest freight forwarder globally. Air logistics, where we're the second largest freight forwarder globally. Contract logistics with a global footprint, and road logistics with a strong footprint in Europe, North America, and strongly increasing in Asia. So you see a global logistics group that actually serves the exact same purpose as what Nina was explaining before. A couple of words on myself. I studied at the same university as probably a couple of you in St. Gallen. After that, I joined the consulting industry. I was working in strategy consulting for 9 years. I've seen quite a few industries before then falling in love with supply chain and logistics, and then joined another logistics group, first as corporate development manager, and now since 5 years with Kühn & Nagel as part of a bespoke business field, which is called integrated logistics. That's the Kühn & Nagel name for 4PL solutions, which is a bit complicated to explain. In a nutshell, we talk about outsourcing of supply chain departments. So we're offering end-to-end supply chain solutions for customers, which again is based on systems, on processes, and people. That's about me, and I'd like to hand over back to Maximilian.
Great, thank you very much, Matthias. So again, as you can all see, we have a really nice dynamic. On one hand, we have a young startup, and on the other hand, we have a rather more traditional player in the logistics market, and academia in between. What could go wrong? So just for how it's going to work later on, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat during the whole discussion, and we will allocate 10 minutes at the end of this session to be able to answer your questions. So you can either write them in the chat, or you can ask them live as soon as we enter the Q&A. All right, so let's dive in. I think we have a solid 27 minutes for some discussion. I first want to talk about, of course, a topic that has been around for the past year. I mean, we all have read in the headlines, supply chains are collapsing and supply chains are going bust, and we have to do something about the supply chains. So I guess it started off with a sort of supply shock in February 2020 when COVID-19, the outbreak in China, it was imminent in Europe, and the companies were not really prepared. It followed then with a demand shock. We remember all the scenes where there was no toilet paper, no disinfectant, no masks in stock. And in fact, the first time since World War II, where we were struggling to provide the population with some essential consumer goods. And at least in the Western world. And then we were talking a lot about the aftermath, so bullwhip effects, inventory bounces, etc. So just an open question to you both to get started. Was the fear of collapsing supply chains real? What did supply chains deal with back then? How did you see from your company perspective the impact of COVID-19 on your operations and on supply chains in general? So maybe we start with Matthias.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we have to look at different industries, right? So as a 4PL provider, we cover a lot of different industries, and the impact that you were describing was hugely different. If we look at high tech as an industry, that supply shock that you were illustrating was incredible, right? So there was literally nothing coming out of China for a considerable amount of time, while other industries didn't experience that initial shock that you were outlining at the same level, right? And then afterwards, once we had a pickup again, we immediately ran into capacity issues for outbound shipments out of Asia, which then drove a lot of let's say established processes that had been in place for a long time completely off the charts, right? The number of spot quotes that had to be done and considered just skyrocketed because the capacities were not available anymore on the contracted rates. The established carriers were not able to provide freight capacities. And for the supply chain managers in that situation across the board on a global level, it was a completely unprecedented situation.
So just to add on to that, I would say also to summarize it, sort of planning processes, like these classical planning processes, were not ready for, I guess, this new spike. I guess these classical moving averages that you use to plan sort of inventory and to plan purchase orders, they weren't valid anymore. So people, I guess, supply chain managers need to get more creative than that.
A customer of ours, just to add to that, the customer of ours coined an interesting phrase. He said, like, look, established time series are completely broken, right? So whatever was true in the past somehow doesn't work anymore.
Also, I think what we've seen in the past is that quite a lot of customers often do just-in-time shipping, or with rather short planning horizon. And this is what also caused some of the issues, because as Matthias said, the standard timeframes and cycles, which had been the same over years and years, now all of a sudden were completely thrown overboard and went wild. And I think what's also important to add, I think, of course, on the one hand side, when in Wuhan the virus broke out, there was a shutdown there, which somehow disturbed some parts of the supply chain. But I would say the supply chains didn't really break down, because what was more of an issue was that soon after, we here in Germany and in Europe went into a lockdown, and all of the sales markets crashed. So there was all of a sudden no demand anymore for any product, so nobody had to ship anything. And that's when a lot of the carriers took ships out of their fleet, put them basically took them out of the market and put them to a halt. And I think it was up to 50% of the whole capacity. So when demand started to pick up again and shippers wanted to ship goods to Europe again, there was like the capacity was just getting tighter and tighter. And the carriers became really, really well in the game of putting the demand or the supply really neatly next to the demand.
Yeah.
And that's how they are currently making the business of their lifetimes.
And so interesting practices, and Nina, just to add to your comment, right? Interesting practices that are deployed by the carriers at the moment. For example, they do slow steaming, right? They just reduce the speed of the vessel. That means that the trajectory takes longer, and this automatically reduces the capacity that's available in the market, right? So that's one very simple but ultimately efficient way of adjusting demand or available capacity to the actual demand in the market.
And I think what nobody really expected is that after this lockdown, the whole demand goes up like crazy again. And this is exactly what happened. I mean, like we were all sitting at home, not going out traveling, not doing a lot of things culturally. Everybody was still a bit cautious. So a lot of people started buying quite a lot of stuff, buying quite a lot of things online, like do-it-yourself stuff, garden furniture, and so on. So the demand rose insanely, and that's why so many products now had to be transported. And by now, all of the ships and the fleets are back in the market, but we're still going over capacity. I think the Asia-Europe trade is partially booked 110, 120%. And we just don't have any more ships that exist right now to fill up this increasing demand. That's why right now the prices for transporting goods here to Germany, for example, or everywhere around the world are skyrocketing. Just to give you a number, just a couple of months back, one container shipped from Asia to Europe would have costed 1,600 euro US dollar approximately. Right now it's at 3.5 thousand euro. And on trades from Asia to the US or to Australia, for example, we're already at 5,000. So prices are skyrocketing, and at some point, these prices will also transfer to consumer products. Maybe one unrelated comment, which I definitely want to make. You were talking about shortages in terms of or regarding consumer products like toilet paper and so on. This had nothing to do with supply chains. Like there was more than enough of the products available already in Europe and Germany even. It was just that some people, out of fear probably or worry, went into the supermarkets and bought much more than they were expected to buy, because toilet paper is not a seasonal product. It's bought throughout the whole year at very constant rates usually. But some people just started to hoard these things for themselves and were acting out of probably a place of fear and somewhat also selfishness, and that led to the fact that there wasn't enough toilet paper, and regale were empty.
So you would argue that it was less of a supply chain problem, more of a consumer problem in that sense, more a psychological consumer problem that led to some problems in supply chains of consumer products. And I still ask myself, I mean, lots of, I guess, supply chain managers and procurement managers, they talk about, oh, we need to watch out for the next time this happens. This can't happen again. We need to have all shelves full at all times, even if people go and do Hamsterkäufe. I don't think there's an English word for that. So my question generally is, have we learned, or at least have your customers learned anything from this scenario?
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest learnings is that everyone needs to start planning ahead and engage more in forward-looking planning. So just in time is not going to work anymore. If you do it and if you bet against the market and are basically playing on, because that's what a lot of shippers did in the past, they just bet that the prices at some point would fall, as they always did, and then procure the rates at a very low price. That's not going to happen again very soon. For right now, at least, spot customers need to pay quite high prices. That's why forward-looking planning, creating proper forecasts and handing them also to the business partners, so to carriers or to forwarders, will become crucial. And we already see some mindset change in some of our customers. And then one other big learning, less related to supply chain, but more on a general level, is that we've seen that home office really works. So, I mean, for us as a digital company, it was no problem whatsoever to move into home office because we've been fully digital anyway. So everybody just worked from a different place. But I think a lot of customers have seen that, first of all, they need to be able to switch into a setup like this because there might be a second wave. I mean, we're right now probably right in it. So they need to be equipped for this. And on the other hand side, I also think a lot of employers saw that this is possible without any issues. So it's not that people working from home are less productive or don't work as well anymore. I think it's quite the opposite. People are actually more productive in home office. They have more time to do the tasks that they need to do with or in a calm manner. I think what we right now really need to look out for is mental health.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to step back a little bit and talk about the topic of resilience a little more. So McKinsey, they published a study, big study on resilient supply chains, and they claim that 93% of supply chain managers, they want to look at more resilience and they want to introduce resilience programs, and they want to look at new strategies to be able to prevent that they're going to have problems once a supplier in Asia or surrounding regions, I guess, defaults or is impossible to deliver, to supply product on time. So I just want to ask you, what is resilience for you? Did you introduce, is resilience on your map at all? And what changes in innovation do we see right now in the market to introduce these resilience measures in that sense?
So maybe let me pick that up. So what do we see on that topic, right? In line with what Nina had said before, right? So you said just in time is over. We said at some point, just in time was replaced by just in case, which goes very much into the view of scenario planning or scenario modeling. I think that's one of the basic activities that's happening now, that are happening now in terms of companies trying to understand somehow their exposure to plannable or unplannable risks, right? So being able to somehow have a plan in the drawer to understand what can I do when the next time a bus hits the company, the way how COVID has hit many companies these days. And then the second element that I'd like to mention in that context is in line with what you quoted on the McKinsey study, that there's indeed a willingness for companies to consider resilience as a let's say performance factor in supply chains. Supply chain has historically been a game of actually balancing cost versus performance. It's always been kind of how much do I have to pay in order to reach a certain performance, right? And the whole aspect of embedded risk and therefore kind of implied resilience has been completely ignored. And there's indeed a readiness today from a supply chain and also from a narrow perspective, from a logistics perspective, to have let's say a setup that's probably not cost optimal, but if you consider risk aspects, that's still more favorable than if you take a pure play cost consideration. Right, and you ask about innovation. What innovative elements drive the behavior at the moment, right? I think I think Nina and I we could start talking about that topic for 5 hours now. But I just take a random example that jumps to my mind when hearing your question, Maximilian. One element that customers really struggled with was visibility, right? If your supply chain is not following the exact same logic as it has in the past years, because you need to switch to new providers, if you have to follow new routings because the established transport routes are somehow not working due to capacity constraints or pricing issues, then all of a sudden the information channels that you've been using probably more informally in the past, they don't work anymore. So, and the question of where is my shipment and where's my cargo? When does it arrive? Is it actually loaded on the vessel or not, right? All of these type of information, they were all of a sudden highly sought after. And being able now to somehow provide visibility on exactly these very simple questions is something that visibility technology in all sorts and form will be able to provide.
I can just join in. I think one of the key elements in building resilience is, or right now already is and will be, a combination of digital technologies and great customer service. Because you need technology to optimally do everything that's possible in an automated way, because the machine per se is more resilient or reliable than a human being, because errors might happen and you're also tied to that person. So that's one part. But on the other hand, of course, you also need a proper exception management in place. And this exception management, of course, you can also train machines with machine learning and artificial intelligence to do these kind of things. But at some point, they will always, or right now at least, you will always need a human being that can, in the worst case, interfere and escalate and find a good solution. Because, I mean, let's face it, logistics is not a very standard game. Like, an escalation is basically, they're all like in 100% of the cases, there's always something that goes wrong and not as planned. So you will always need to be able to make changes or make a decision ad hoc. And then on top of that, now I completely forgot what I want to say. And I think this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I think also what the crisis has shown is that globalization is one of the key drivers to resilience. Because if we would all just be working within our own ecosystems or within one country, and then the crisis would hit exactly that country, everything's gone, you're dead. But if you build up a global company with global supply chains, and by that I don't mean you make yourself dependent fully on China, but rather you really diversify the suppliers you work with, you diversify the supply chains you're engaging in. That builds quite a lot of resilience, as we've seen, for example, in the case of the masks that were needed here in Germany now. Like, we, with our production facilities, would have never been able to produce them in that short of a time. But we were able to use the production capacities in China and simply fly them over with thousands of charter flights.
Great. So I think this is a great transition to our next topic. So talking about different supplier strategies, I guess also being able to measure certain information at certain points in the supply chain. closing the interface between physical flow of goods and also the digital flow of data. I guess that's a topic that you two have been dealing with in all your supply chain logistics career. So I, in some projects that I worked on, I heard more and more that sustainability in that sense is also a component of resilience, and getting more and more a component of resilience. If we think about, okay, do I choose a supplier in Asia or do I choose a supplier in Europe, with the trade-off that I have to pay more for the same product in Europe? All these questions are also arising more and more in the world of procurement, in the world of supply chains. So, and then also you have more consumer pressure, you have more regulatory pressure. And now in November in Switzerland, there's the Konzernverantwortungsinitiative being voted on. It's a referendum that basically decides whether big companies or big corporations need to justify which suppliers they work with, and they need to justify that they work with suppliers that that are in line with human rights codes and also in line with sustainability codes. So my question is, what is the status quo currently with regards to sustainability in supply chains, and what innovations and technologies again do we see to make more sustainable supply chains a reality in the future?
Yeah, so I think what we can all agree on is that sustainability, or rather climate change, is a global problem that really is more and more of an issue for all of us as a whole society. I think what we're right now seeing also in logistics space is that quite a lot of things are moving. There are quite a lot of players who are already bringing transparency into this dark area, because so far it's really hard to measure the impact of emissions of transports. So this is also our approach right now. We see that there are companies out there, so producing companies, who are partially very, very knowledgeable about the topic, because sustainability has been part of their reason of existence. So it's been ingrained in their DNA. But then there's also companies who basically have no clue about the amount of emissions that comes out of their transports, or they're not even aware of the topic in general sometimes. So we realized if we want to we first of all need to create awareness on the topic of sustainability, so that everybody really knows what's going on, and create transparency based on data. It's basically the same approach that we started 4.5 years ago. We reapply it right now just to a different topic. And then based on that, as you already said, there's increasing consumer demand. To maybe just put a number out there, there's a BCG study stating that 70% of consumers are willing to pay a 5% premium on sustainable products. And on the other hand side, you also have regulations which are coming more and more into place. For example, there's going to be a CO2 tax, which is going to come into play by the end of the year, which will, in one or the other way, eventually affect us all. And out of this demand that's currently being created, together with the company's own willingness to also invest into these topics, because they realize we really need to change something, otherwise we're all screwed. Based on that, I think the industry is right now starting to create more and more solutions. So 2 solutions that we are currently offering is, first of all, the transparency solution, that you really can see all of your emissions broken down onto different transport modes, onto different transport legs, and get a clear picture of where do most of the emissions actually happen. Because, for example, air freight has much more emissions than sea freight does. Or also a truck emits much more CO2 than a rail or a barge shipment. And then based on this transparency, we are able to offer, and this is not only us, this is hopefully a lot of companies, because we all need to work together on this important topic, are then able to propose our customers viable and climate friendlier solutions to transport their goods. Then next to that, we're currently, and I know that Kühn & Nagel is offering the same product, and I'm very happy that most of the big players do by now. offsetting. What's important, so I don't know, is anyone unaware of what offsetting is? And then I quickly explain. So basically, you determine the amount of emissions that's being emitted from a certain process, and then you pay money to a project provider who is then engaging in some form of eco-friendly activities. So for example, there's reforestation projects, there's cooking stove projects, there's a huge range on different projects which are sustainable either on an ecological or also on a social level. Yeah, you basically pay off the damage that you have caused. And that's basically also the issue with offsetting. It's just treating the symptoms. So it's definitely not an end solution. It's just a stepping stone on the way to an overall more sustainable society and business also. Because we're not treating the root cause yet. Right now, this is also very difficult because there are literally almost no zero emission solutions out there yet. A lot of companies are researching, thank you. Researching. So, for example, in the shipping industry or with big container ships, Maersk and other carriers, they're currently researching quite heavily in the field of alternative fuels, hydrogen. I've heard here and there. Airbus is currently researching or trying to build the first hydrogen ship. There are electric trucks. There are hydrogen trucks. And so there's quite a lot happening at the moment, which is great to see. However, what's also important to note, these technologies will take, first of all, they will take time to develop. So this is likely going to take 10, 20, if not even 30 years until they're really fully commercially viable and accessible everywhere. And then second of all, they will come at a price. I mean, this is a new technology. There's a lot of there's lots of developing costs, which will also result in a higher price, especially at the beginning, which is why I think it's super, super crucial that we also make people and our customers especially aware that carbon has a price. We simply at the moment do not take it into account.
Great, thank you, Nina. I would like to give over to Matthias to comment on this.
Yeah, I think Nina's provided a very comprehensive view on what we can drive from a logistics perspective as logistics service providers. And just to add one perspective from Kühne Nagel, that's on a group level, sustainability is one key strategic initiative that we have, looking at our own emissions that we have as a company, but then also working with and for our customers to support them in, on the one hand, measuring the emission levels that they have in their supply chain, and then on the other hand, supporting them in reducing their footprint and ultimately also to provide offsetting solutions as part of that net zero carbon program that we have. So that's very much in line with what Nina has explained, also from a Kühne Nagel perspective. Now, let's go back to the conversation, Maximilian, that we had yesterday when we briefly prepared ourselves for this call here. You asked probably quite provocatively, like, is this real, right? Is this are companies really willing to engage in supply chain setups that are more sustainable and therefore also incurring additional costs? And for me, from what I see from our customers is a clear yes, in terms of that there is not a, let's call it, lip service that is delivered to a sustainability report instead, but it's really a firm commitment from many customers on a strategic level to engage in more sustainable activities. And this is on the one hand driven by regulations, right? Nina was making reference to a couple of regulations. In high tech, for example, you have WEEE, which is quite restrictive in Europe already, but much more than regulations, it's the consumer as a driver, right? We had reference to that BCG study on the willingness to pay a premium, right? And it's really on us as consumers to make our buying decisions when being conscious about the sustainability impacts of the product that we buy, right? And it's obvious, not always very obvious, right? Let's take the fashion industry and let's see what let's briefly consider what the fashion industry delivers or kind of causes in terms of sustainability impact, right? And if we get this view, that might drive actually buying behavior on our side in terms of us making consumer decisions. And that's a very strong driver, which we see as a logistics company reflected in company behavior very directly.
Very important point. Maybe one thing to add here, also, I think what also belongs to conscious consumer decisions is really thinking about, do I actually need to buy this product? I think we all need to start by consuming less, consuming more consciously, as Matthias said, start to recycle, reuse, and reduce the amount of things we're consuming.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we need to move on to the next topic. So I would like to just ask each one of you to maybe give 30 seconds, 40 seconds, an insight of what you think the supply chain manager of the future looks like. So we have lots of students here that maybe are interested in the logistics sector and also in generally how a supply chain operates and how it works. What are the qualifications a supply chain manager of the 21st century needs to bring to the table? Has that changed in the past decades? When I used to think of logistics, I used to think of someone who's calling the logistics service providers nonstop and trying to coordinate a certain delivery. So what has digitization done to this job? What has COVID done to this job? Maybe you can give some quick insights regarding this.
Nina, if it's okay, I pick up this one first. So if you ask me how the supply chain of the future looks like, I say the supply chain of the future is a collaborative one. Now that's a very broad statement, but what does that mean, or what do I mean by that? Collaboration means that the skills that are required these days to successfully manage a best-in-class supply chain can almost impossibly be ingrained into one person only. So the phone guy, Maximilian, that you have in mind probably doesn't use the phone so much these days, but this individual still exists, right? And he's still needed. But then you have a lot of additional competencies and skills that are required. If we look just at the amount of data that is generated every day in a supply chain, you need people and you need skills that are capable of analyzing the data, of making sense of all that information, and of supporting the person on the phone in drawing the right conclusions from a, let's say, day-to-day operations perspective, but also from a more transformational perspective. And secondly, as an additional skill, just to add two new competencies, is change management. You have that famous statement from Albert Einstein, actually, that in order to that life is like a bicycle, right? You have to keep your balance. You have to keep moving in order to keep your balance, right? Supply chain are exactly the same. So in order to keep moving, or in order to keep your supply chain balance, you have to keep moving, and that means that you are required as a supply chain organization to continuously evolve and to drive change throughout your entire organization, and that requires people that are able to understand where weak spots are in an organization, and how they can actually drive these type of changes throughout an organization, right? These can be any type of profiles. It can be very process driven, right? So what you might think of in Six Sigma capabilities, but also more strategic profiles that then require companies to more fundamentally rethink their supply chain setups.
Great, thank you. Maybe Nina, 20 seconds.
Oh, sorry, that was too long. Yeah.
So we have some time for questions.
Just to quickly add to that, so I 100% agree with Matthias. I think what you can definitely say is that most of the processes will be automated, especially all of the repetitive manual work that has been happening throughout the history of logistics which we have seen in the beginning when we started everywhere, this will all go away because machines can do it much better. What you will need is, in addition to what Matthias said, people who are great communicators, both towards the customer and also internally. You need people who are great at problem solving, because logistics is and will always be a complex game. And especially when things get, when there's a deadline to it, as there always is in the supply chain, you need to be able to make proper decisions fast to really understand what's the issue and how can we solve it. And then last but not least, I think you really need to be able to work with data, with digital systems. I think you don't necessarily have to be able to code. Of course, I mean, in our company, we have 25% engineers, or the tech team is 25% of the overall team. So this skill will become increasingly more important in logistics companies as well. But it's not all there is. So we also need logistics specialists. We need people who are excellent in customer service. We need the process people, the strategists. So there's a place for everyone in a logistics company, I would say.
Great, thank you very much. So looking for diverse profiles with digital skills, also being able to communicate with people. Maybe there are some of you who are interested in doing this type of work. Of course, last but not least, also we at the Institute of Supply Chain Management, we're always looking for great students as well for projects and for theses. So in case you're interested in diving deep into some supply chain management topic, I'm always ready to talk. So I guess with this, we can transition to the Q&A. So I would first hand over to those students who can ask a question live. So maybe if you ask your question, turn on your mic, turn on your video so we can see you. Don't be scared. We're not going to bite. So I guess
maybe a short comment from my side. I think because it's already 7, we will do the Q&A. We will do like 10-15 minutes, whatever it takes. Only for those who have to leave, thank you already. And for the ones that will stay, I already opened my beer in order to make this conversation a bit more comfortable. And so you're all invited to do that, to do it a bit more of a really cool discussion, because I think we have had a lot of insights. But yeah, that's from my side.
Okay, great. So is there any question from the audience for either panel participant?
Would you like us to ask the questions in person, or is the chat better?
Because we already put a couple of questions into the chat.
Yes, I saw those questions in the chat. If you would like to ask them in person, it would be maybe a little more interactive and nice. Yeah.
Sure, I can just start. So when you mentioned slow steaming, I was just wondering, because within a sustainability course, we've had also a guest speaker talking about the impact of reducing the speed of freight carriers by sea in terms of noise level, but also in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and that it has a very huge impact to achieve the less carbon emissions. And I was just wondering if there is any tendency to be seen whether if suppliers are already using it to keep this, and not in terms of just of prices, but in terms of sustainability.
So I brought up the topic, right? So maybe I take a first stab at it. And to be fully transparent, I have not heard of slow steaming in the context of sustainability, Niklas, right? The comment you make is obvious and it makes total sense to me. But I have, as I said, I've not heard of that practice in connection with achieving sustainability targets. Does that mean that that this is not something that might come in the future? No, I don't think so. It's just, for me, something that has not been actively pursued, at least in those areas that I have direct visibility.
I think it's more of a side effect that comes with it. So I think sustainability was not the main reason to introduce slow steaming, but in the end, due to the lower speed, it is more sustainable because less emissions get set free. So this is one of the quite many nice side effects in terms of sustainability that happens in logistics. To give one other example, I already stated it before, but Matthias earlier mentioned that the logistics industry is very cost-driven. And interestingly enough, the current solutions that we have, so the current standard transport modes, so to say, the cost structure basically also follows the emission structure. So the more expensive solutions that we have, like air freight, for example, or rail freight compared to sea freight, they are on the one hand side more expensive, and on the other hand side, they also cause more emissions. So there's a double incentive to basically switch on more environmentally friendly options. And I think it was a similar effect with slow steaming. So no intention to do something good for the environment, but accidentally it happened anyway. So to be honest, I don't know if carriers are planning to use this more frequently. I don't know. Do you know, Matthias?
No.
Okay. But then also just maybe to add onto the question, if you point out that it is a really cost-driven business and the focus is on the monetary benefits, then it really shows the conflict of interest that sustainability really just is an afterthought there, right? And if it just happens to be in line with, I don't know, less or less costly way of transportation, works out fine, but without the external pressure, for example, through the emission tax that is coming, there wouldn't be so much happening unless the consumers explicitly ask for it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's I tried to illustrate that chain before when I said, you know, a strong driver next to regulations, Nicholas, that you're also quoting, right? A strong driver is the consumer, right? And what does consumer behavior trigger, right? It triggers a behavior in the company providing the end product that the consumer buys, right? In B2B and B2C context. And then you can say, okay, the logistics industry is actually working for that specific company. So it's kind of one step further away, right? So while B2C companies have embraced these topics probably much longer, it's definitely also arrived in logistics, right? If I look at really, and I quoted that example before of Kühne+Nagel as the largest sea freight forwarder in the world, right? The amount of energy we are investing as a group into this net zero carbon program is immense, right? And the commitments that we're making, not just kind of that we support our customers, but what we deliver as a company is also is really substantial. So there is also in the logistics industry definitely a lot of rethinking that has happened in the past years.
So I would have a question. I don't know. Is there still someone? Can I ask a question? Is this okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So concerning recycling, I'm a bit. So of course, refurbishing and reusing is much better, let's say, than recycling, much more sustainable. But for example, if you look at IKEA at their sustainability report, they say they recycle now a lot. They, for example, polyester is being recycled up to 100% now. And I'm wondering, how can you keep the quality in the products while still recycling and keeping this in the loop all the time? Like, how does this work over time? Once I get it, but twice, for 3 times, 4 times. Where do you keep the quality of the products?
Maybe I can just reflect on what we do for customers in terms of managing a return flow. We do that for a manufacturer that produces printers, for example. So material comes back, and it can have a different type of classifications. It can be it can come back from the shelf because the retailer wasn't able to sell it. So you can just re-inject that into the sales cycle. You don't even have to touch it. If the box was open, you check it. Maybe you do a software upgrade, whatever. You can run a different level of product verifications once they come back as a used product, and then you kind of recategorize them. And many of these products have a kind of a second life, let's call it that way, that they can be reused. maybe after a minor upgrade or patching, or they are used in a completely different segment of the market that has different requirements in terms of product quality. So that's one way of mitigating the quality impact that you have been alluding to. But I think you were more in the actual recycling topic or domain, where you really dismantle a product and you recycle the ingredients, right? I had the opportunity at some point to visit a company in Belgium who does that for a living, right? And they have a lot of different product segments that they cover, among others electronics, and we all know that they have precious metals in there that come out of mines very often in Africa, which are kind of brought to the surface of the earth under very difficult conditions. So it must actually be it's a commodity that is not just expensive but also scarce, in the sense that we should really limit the use of those, right? And the technology that these companies have developed in order to extract the last 0.01% of the required materials out of the whole scrap that they get through melting and somehow processing it is absolutely stunning and impressive. I would never have believed that this is possible from just from a sheer technological perspective. And I think that's probably just a descriptive answer to your inherent question, right? There seems to be by now processing technologies in place that are able to extract an incredible percentage of kind of embedded materials out of recycling goods.
And maybe to add to that, maybe instead of just always trashing everything and then recycling it, we should also invest more into buying and building high quality products which have a longer life expectancy, which we can use for a longer period. Because I mean, I myself, I've made quite a mindset change throughout the last couple of years. Like some 3-4 years ago, I would like all the time go to Zara and buy fast fashion there. But then I realized what kind of an impact this actually has on the environment and ultimately can lead to for us as a society. So I completely switched my mindset, and right now I'm either buying secondhand, so I'm already engaging in the circular economy, or on top of that, I really make sure that I only buy high quality products which will last for at least 5, 10, if not many more years. So I think this is one very important aspect that should always be kept in mind. Of course, sometimes you then have to pay a little premium for that, but you will also be able to use the product for much longer.
Great, thank you very much. So are there any questions? Any more questions from the audience?
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I also wanted to ask something regarding sustainability. We talked about like the options that there are, such as carbon compensation, changing consumer behavior, also recycling and so on. And I was wondering, in terms of decarbonization, I think a solution that is quite talked about, especially for transport and like freight and all of that, is hydrogen, and specifically green hydrogen. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on the potential of the solution. I know it's like currently a bit still at an early phase, but yeah, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on its potential and also the barriers to actually like make it happen and have like shipping running on green hydrogen and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so to make sure this comes across in the right way, I'm definitely not an expert in hydrogen. I'm also not an engineer, but nevertheless, I've been talking and reading about it quite a lot, also talking to a lot of our partners. So I personally think there is huge potential. There are a lot of companies investing quite a lot of money into technology, into developing Brennstoffzellen, so the yeah, okay. I don't know the English word for it. And I think what's important to note here that green hydrogen is really the only solution. Like blue hydrogen won't work because it's also quite bad for the environment. So For anyone who isn't aware, green hydrogen means that the electricity used to power the hydrogen process or hydrogen development process comes from renewable energies. So if we power this with oil, it's no better than what we do right now. A little bit, but in the end, it won't make the change. So we need green hydrogen. And as I said, I see quite a lot of potential. So there are already the first hydrogen trucks out there. There are a lot of the big trucking companies like VW, but also startups like Nikola. They're investing quite heavily into these technologies. I know of a company which is already running on hydrogen trucks. So it's coming closer. Regarding the air freight sector, for example, Airbus, as I already said, is currently trying to build the first hydrogen airplane. And I think this would really change the game for the whole air freight industry, because right now the amount of emissions that one single plane is emitting is insanely high. So if we can switch that technology to a green one, this will be a complete game changer. And then in terms of shipping, I've heard different opinions. So for Maersk, for example, hydrogen is not really a feasible solution, at least not right now. They are more investing or investigating towards alternative fuels. However, I've heard from other companies and from the industry in general that there might also be a potential, and probably I've heard the same as you, but there also still seems to be quite a bit of potential to implement hydrogen, especially into large vessels. But maybe good news, we're already coming closer also to realizing alternatives which are more eco-friendly. The first LNG ship from CMA CGM has just done its first drive. LNG is also one alternative fuel. It's also not an end solution, because it's just a little bit better than Schweröl, so yeah, like standard oil, but it's already a move in the right direction.
Great, thank you very much. Just to add on to that, I read of a company, it's a small company, I'm not sure where they're based, I think in Germany. They're transforming, I guess, classical trucks to hydrogen trucks. I don't know, maybe one of you knows this company. So we're having these trends that we don't need to build the complete vehicle from scratch, but be able to refunction or redomain already existing vehicles. Again, as you said, and this is relevant for, I think, battery powered vehicles as well as hydrogen powered vehicles. It always depends on the production of the batteries or the production of the hydrogen. It's hypocritical if you say I'm driving battery powered vehicles, but the production of these batteries with the mining of the lithium and the whole production process emitting carbon, you have to be able to manage that. So I think maybe this is a bit provocative if I say it, but I think right now companies or car builders right now are they're putting a medal on their chest saying I'm producing battery powered vehicles. However, maybe if you check 2-3 tiers of suppliers in their supply chain, maybe and you measure that correctly, maybe it looks a little different. I'm not sure what your stance is on that. Would you agree, or would you say this is not?
I've been in touch very specifically, Maximilian, with a car manufacturer that seeked to have a solution in place from a supply chain perspective to be able to trace the cobalt that goes into its batteries that they built into their cars. They want to be able to guarantee to their end buyer that what goes into their batteries, into their cars, is sustainable, especially from a child labor perspective. Cobalt mines are, as per their assessment, very difficult in terms of labor conditions and child labor that goes into the producing of that material. And they want to ensure that really from the mine to the car, the supply chain can be followed in terms of making sure that that it's sustainable from that angle, right? Sustainability has many dimensions, and this is just one specific example of how a car manufacturer is addressing that same issue that you have been voicing now.
Yes. So again, we come back to the topic of supply chain visibility, supply chain transparency, in order to manage the big mega trends that we're seeing, resilience and sustainability. And I think with that, we can conclude today's session.
Sorry. Can I have just like one more question? And I promise it's like
it's a very round question. Yeah.
If the panel participants still have time, then sure, just one last question. Please.
I can even ask for like only 20-second answers. I think it's enough.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, so I think there's so many like key areas where you can work to become more circular, to have a more circular supply chain. I was wondering, from your perspective, is there an area where you're thinking like research or business model development or product design, where you're saying there's still need of a lot of development, there's still need of a lot of innovation? More like a recommendation for future startups.
It's a very good question. I mean, we will always need innovation everywhere because, I mean, also for us as a digital startup, we're always trying to be at the forefront of innovation, but like there's always new topics popping up. I think one very important topic right now, for example, which we are going to face in the future more and more often, is carbon capture. I think there already is quite a lot of innovation happening, but we haven't talked about it in this panel, at least not. But this is something which we will need to engage in more frequently, because at the pace we're currently running, we will not be able to meet the 1.5 degrees targets that we've set in the Paris Agreement. That's why we will need to start taking carbon out of the atmosphere and capturing it somewhere. And then I think, I'm not sure if I think right now what we, maybe I hope, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but I think what we right now need the most are people who are willing to, or who want to change the world, who want to make it a better place, who are willing to take bold risks, to really fight for a cause, and who are also willing to shift the mindsets of society. Because I think that's what we currently need the most, that people start to think in a sustainable way, that people start to look at their own behavior, become more conscious on so many different levels.
Florian, you brought up the term of the circular economy, right? That's quite a big concept. And understanding that you take a specific interest, I think that you might be familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the work that they are putting forward, right? So it's quite a comprehensive concept, and a lot of work and research goes into that arena. Just from my perspective, right? The one research area, and your question was very specific in research areas, could be, and I'm not sure whether this already exists or not, but it could be into an end-to-end reporting logic, right? Because the concept that Ellen MacArthur Foundation puts forward under that circular economy umbrella is quite comprehensive. From taking material out of the ground until it's actually then brought back into the ground again, right? And with primary use, second life, and so on and so forth, right? And to have a logic in place that allows a company to properly report and assess their performance following that circular economy logic would probably be quite a step forward. And I understand that it's quite comprehensive and quite complex. So an academic approach would not seem too wrong to do the first steps there.
Yes, thank you very much. So maybe my 5 seconds to this question also from a research perspective, we're constantly facing the challenge of aligning, again, the digital data flow and the physical goods flow. And with this on an end-to-end supply chain, as Matthias already said, to be able to, at certain points, measure certain values, right? We can talk about sustainability here. We can talk about any other topic, be able to measure what is happening at each point and be able to get this information in order to project what is happening in the real world as fast as possible. That's a challenge that is always going to be relevant in supply chain management. And with new topics, again, such as resilience, sustainability coming up, it will become even more relevant. So with that, I would like to conclude, and I would like to give over to Jonas.
Yes, I think the first words from our side is a huge thank you to Nina, Matthias, and also Max. I think the discussion was like very interesting, very fruitful, and very cool. Also very engaging at the end. So yeah, and also to all the listeners, huge thank you for joining this event, this online event. And if you're interested in knowing more about inno-maker or innovative topics, and if you're interested in keeping or staying up to date what's coming up next, for example, the podcast episode that I mentioned, then just follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, like the channels, and then there's some new stuff coming up. And then thank you very much to Matthias and Nina. Unfortunately, we are not able to drink a beer together afterwards, but we will maybe do that sometimes in the future. But we see each other again. I'm sure.
To that. Maybe one last note from my side also, if anyone's now interested to learn more about Forto or the work we do in sustainability, please feel free to reach out either to me on LinkedIn, or if you wanted to apply for a position directly, we have a full-on list on our website, forto.com. We also have an Instagram account, so feel free to follow us. And thank you all for listening. And again, thank you guys for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for the initiative, Jonas and colleagues. Very good.
Bye, have a good night. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.